The city of Lagos never sleeps. The streets are alive with the honking of danfos, the chatter of traders in Balogun Market, and the salty breeze from the lagoon. It was in this ever-moving city that Adanna built her life. At 28, she was the head fashion designer at an upscale boutique in Victoria Island. Her designs graced the wardrobes of the elite, yet her heart yearned for something deeper: love, companionship, something more than the glamour of high society. One evening, as she stepped out of her shop, adjusting the fold of her Ankara wrap dress, a sudden downpour soaked the streets. Frustrated, she stood beneath the shop's awning, cursing Lagos' unpredictable weather. Just as she was about to dash to her car, a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, miss, do you need an umbrella?" She turned to find a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard, dressed in a well-fitted navy blue suit, holding out a large black umbrella. His smile was warm, disarming. Adanna hesitated but eventually stepped under the shade he offered. "Thank you," she muttered, glancing at him as they walked toward her car. "I'm Adanna." "Daniel," he replied, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone used to being in control. "I've seen you here a few times. You own the boutique?" "Yes, I do." "Well, it's a pleasure to finally meet the lady behind the elegance." As the rain continued to pour, something told Adanna that this was more than just a fleeting moment. She had no idea that this chance meeting would mark the beginning of a journey neither of them could predict. Days passed, and Adanna found herself thinking about the stranger with the umbrella. There was something about Daniel's confidence and charm that lingered in her mind. She had met many men, some flashy, others arrogant, but he was different. His presence was strong, yet he carried himself with an effortless grace that was rare in a city filled with noise and haste. It wasn't long before fate intervened again. One afternoon, while supervising a dress fitting for a high-profile client, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Turning around, she found Daniel standing by the entrance of her boutique. He was dressed more casually this time: dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a confident smile that made her heart skip a beat. "Not at all," she said, regaining her composure. "What brings you here?" "I needed a gift for my sister's birthday, and I figured I'd support a talented designer while I'm at it." Adanna chuckled, leading him toward a display of elegant dresses. "Well, you came to the right place. What's her style?" Daniel's gaze rested on her for a moment before he answered, "She has great taste, but I trust your judgment." His words sent a strange warmth through her, and as she picked out a dress, she couldn't help but wonder, was this just a coincidence, or was Daniel trying to make an impression? Adanna had dealt with clients before, demanding brides, fashion-conscious socialites, and even celebrities. But Daniel was different. There was an air of ease in their interaction, as though they had known each other for much longer. After finalizing the dress for his sister, he lingered, glancing around the boutique with mild curiosity. "You have a good eye for details," he commented, his fingers grazing the embroidery on a custom-made gown. "How did you get into fashion?" Adanna smiled, folding her arms. "My mother was a seamstress. She made clothes for women in our neighborhood. I grew up around fabric, thread, and a sewing machine. I suppose it was only natural." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That's impressive. Passion turned into success." "And what about you?" she asked. "What do you do?" A playful smirk danced on his lips. "I could say I'm just a man who appreciates fine clothing." Adanna raised an eyebrow. "That's a very vague answer." He chuckled. "I work in finance. Investment banking, to be precise." "That explains the sharp suits." "Guilty as charged," he admitted with a grin. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "Would you allow me to take you out for coffee? Strictly as a thank you for helping me pick the perfect dress." Adanna hesitated. Business and pleasure rarely mix well, but there was something about Daniel that intrigued her. Against her better judgment, she found herself nodding. "All right. One coffee." Daniel's smile widened. "One coffee." Yet, deep down, they both knew this meeting would not be the last. Dinner with Daniel was more enjoyable than Adanna had anticipated. The restaurant, an intimate rooftop setting overlooking the Lagos Lagoon, was the perfect backdrop for an evening filled with laughter and engaging conversation. As they dined on grilled seafood and jollof rice, Adanna found herself relaxing in his presence. She was accustomed to men who boasted about their wealth or connections, but Daniel was different. He was confident without arrogance, attentive without being overbearing. "So, tell me," he said, sipping his glass of wine. "What's something people misunderstand about you?" Adanna chuckled. "That I'm too independent to need anyone. People assume because I run a business and make my own decisions, I don't want companionship." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Independence and wanting love aren't mutually exclusive." "Exactly," she said, surprised by how well he understood. "And what about you? What's something people don't know about you?" He hesitated before answering. "That behind the suits and numbers, I'm just a man who wants something real. Lagos can be loud. It's easy to get lost in the rush." She held his gaze for a moment before smiling. "I understand that." By the time they left the restaurant, Adanna knew this was more than just a simple dinner. Something was unfolding between them, something she wasn't sure she was ready for, but something she couldn't ignore either. As Daniel walked her to her car, he paused. "Adanna, I really enjoy spending time with you." A warmth spread through her chest. "Me too." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to do this again?" She met his gaze, feeling the pull between them. "I think I would." As she drove home, her thoughts were consumed by one realization: Daniel wasn't just a gentleman. He was a man who could change everything. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Adanna spent more time together. Coffee dates turned into long evening walks, and text messages stretched into late-night phone calls. Adanna, who had always kept her guard up, found herself opening up to Daniel in ways she never had before. One evening, as they sat by the waterfront at Taku Bay, Daniel reached for her hand. "Adanna, I don't believe in coincidences. Meeting you, it feels like something that was meant to happen." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "I feel the same way." For the first time in a long while, Adanna allowed herself to believe in something real. Adanna and Daniel's bond deepened as the weeks passed, yet neither of them had explicitly defined their relationship. The Lagos social scene was relentless, and Adanna often found herself wondering how Daniel managed to balance his high-powered job with the quiet moments he shared with her. One evening, after a long day at her boutique, Adanna received a text from Daniel. "Daniel *, meet me at the Orchid Lounge at 8 p.m. I have a surprise for you." Curious, she quickly freshened up and changed into a sleek emerald green dress that hugged her figure perfectly. When she arrived at the lounge, Daniel was already waiting, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that made him look effortlessly dashing. The sight of him sent a flutter through her chest. "Right on time," he said, pulling out a chair for her. Adanna sat, glancing around. "So, what's the surprise?" He slid an envelope across the table. With cautious excitement, she picked it up and peeked inside. "A pair of tickets." "Dubai?" she asked, her brows lifting in surprise. He nodded. "I have a business trip, but I'd love for you to come with me. It's a chance for us to spend some real time together, away from the noise of Lagos." Adanna hesitated. She had never been the type to take impulsive trips, let alone with a man she had only recently started seeing seriously. But the idea of experiencing something new with Daniel thrilled her in a way she couldn't deny. "Say yes," he urged, his hand brushing over hers. A slow smile crept onto her lips. "Yes." As their flight soared over the Atlantic, Adanna gazed out the window, excitement and nervousness warring within her. Daniel sat beside her, flipping through a finance magazine, exuding his usual calm confidence. When he noticed her thoughtful expression, he reached for her hand. "Second thoughts?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No. Just, this is new for me." Daniel smiled, squeezing her fingers lightly. "New can be good." As they landed in Dubai, the warm desert air embraced them. Their hotel was nothing short of luxurious, a suite overlooking the city skyline. Adanna was in awe, but she reminded herself that beyond the glamour, this trip was about understanding the man she was falling for. That evening, as they dined at a rooftop restaurant, Daniel finally spoke about something he had never shared before. "My father built a business empire, but he was never home," he admitted. "I don't want that for myself. I want a life where success and love can coexist." His words touched something deep within Adanna. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "Then maybe we can figure that out together." As the city lights twinkled around them, Adanna realized she was falling for a man who wasn't just a gentleman, but someone who saw her as an equal in the journey of life. Dubai was breathtaking, but even in the midst of its beauty, doubts began to creep into Adanna's mind. She had always been cautious with her heart, yet here she was, traveling with a man she had only known for a few months. Was she moving too fast? On their second day, they explored the bustling souks, the scent of exotic spices filling the air. Daniel was attentive, making sure she was comfortable, but Adanna couldn't shake the feeling that something was left unsaid between them. That evening, as they strolled along the marina, she finally voiced her thoughts. "Daniel, I need to ask, what exactly are we doing?" He stopped walking and turned to her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this." She gestured between them. "You take me on this amazing trip, you treat me like I'm important to you, but we've never actually talked about what this is." Daniel exhaled and looked away for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "You're right. I should have been clearer. I don't want to rush you, Adanna, but I know what I want." "And what is that?" she asked softly. His hand reached for hers. "You." A warmth spread through her chest, but a small voice in her head whispered, "Can you really trust this?" The rest of their trip was filled with laughter, adventure, and moments that made Adanna's heart swell. But as soon as they landed back in Lagos, reality came knocking. Barely a day after their return, Adanna was in her boutique when she received an unexpected visitor. A tall, stunning woman in a fitted red dress walked in, her eyes scanning the shop before settling on Adanna. "You must be Adanna," she said with a knowing smile. Adanna straightened, sensing something off. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" The woman chuckled, stepping closer. "I'm Vanessa. Daniel's ex-fiancée." Adanna's breath caught in her throat. "I thought you deserved to know," Vanessa continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Daniel has a pattern. He makes a woman feel special, sweeps her off her feet, and then leaves." Adanna's mind spun. Had she been wrong about Daniel? Was she just another name on a long list of women he had charmed? As Vanessa left the boutique, her words echoed in Adanna's mind. She had fallen for Daniel, but had she fallen into a trap? Adanna sat motionless in her boutique long after Vanessa had left, her mind clouded with uncertainty. Was Daniel truly the man he claimed to be, or had she been naive to believe in their connection? She replayed every moment they had shared, searching for signs she might have missed. Later that evening, Daniel called. "Hey, beautiful. How was your day?" Adanna hesitated before responding. "Eventful." Daniel picked up on her tone. "What's wrong?" "Vanessa came to see me today," she said, deciding to be direct. "She told me you have a history of leaving women after making them feel special." Silence stretched between them. Then, Daniel sighed. "I was engaged to Vanessa, yes. But she's not telling you the full story." "Then tell me," Adanna urged. "She was in love with the idea of me, not who I actually am. Our relationship was built on expectations that weren't real. I ended it when I realized we weren't meant to be." Adanna wanted to believe him, but the doubt had already taken root. "And what about me? How do I know I'm not just another part of a cycle?" Daniel's voice softened. "Because I've never felt this way before, Adanna. You're different. But were those just words? Adanna wasn't sure anymore. The next few days were tense. Adanna withdrew slightly, no longer as eager to answer Daniel's calls or plan their next date. She needed time to think. Daniel, sensing the change, showed up at her boutique unannounced. "Are you avoiding me?" he asked as she arranged new arrivals on the display shelves. Adanna sighed. "I just need to process everything." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "I get it, but I don't want Vanessa's words to ruin what we have. Can we talk?" She hesitated before nodding. They sat in a quiet corner of the shop, and Daniel spoke first. "I don't want to pressure you, Adanna, but I need you to trust me. I have no control over what Vanessa says, but I know my own heart." Adanna met his gaze, searching for sincerity. "I want to believe you, Daniel. But trust isn't just given, it's built." Daniel reached for her hand but stopped short. "Then let me build it. Give me a chance to prove myself to you." Adanna looked down, weighing his words. Could she trust him again? She didn't have an answer yet, but she knew one thing: she needed more than promises. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection for Adanna. She wasn't one to make rash decisions, especially when it came to her heart. Vanessa's words had planted a seed of doubt, but Daniel's sincerity had watered the hope she wasn't ready to abandon just yet. One evening, Daniel invited her to dinner at a small, intimate restaurant in Victoria Island. Over candlelight and soft jazz, he leaned forward. "I want to take things slow, Adanna. I don't want you to feel pressured, but I also don't want to lose you over misunderstandings." Adanna met his gaze. "I appreciate that, Daniel. But trust takes time." He nodded. "Then let's build it. One step at a time." His patience reassured her, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to enjoy his company without the shadow of doubt looming over them. A week later, Adanna was at a charity event with her best friend, Tola, when she spotted a familiar figure across the room, Vanessa. Before she could decide whether to avoid her or confront her, Vanessa walked up, a sly smile on her lips. "Adanna. Fancy seeing you here." Adanna straightened. "Vanessa. I see you're still entertaining Daniel's illusions," Vanessa said smoothly, sipping her champagne. "Has he told you about Cynthia yet?" Adanna's stomach tightened. "Who is Cynthia?" Vanessa chuckled. "Another woman he made promises to. You should really ask him about her." With that, she walked away, leaving Adanna with a fresh wave of uncertainty. That night, she debated whether to bring it up. Was she allowing Vanessa to manipulate her, or was there truth in her words? One thing was certain: she needed to hear Daniel's side of the story. Adanna couldn't shake Vanessa's words. That night, she sat in her apartment, staring at her phone, debating whether to call Daniel. If there was any truth to Vanessa's claim, she needed to hear it from him. Summoning courage, she dialed his number. "Adanna," Daniel answered, his voice warm. "I was just thinking about you." She took a deep breath. "Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." His tone shifted. "Of course. What is it?" "Who is Cynthia?" she asked, her heart pounding. Silence. Adanna felt her stomach drop. The hesitation was enough to send her mind spiraling. "So, she's real," she pressed. Daniel exhaled. "Yes, she's real. Cynthia was someone I was briefly involved with years ago. It didn't work out because I wasn't ready for something serious at the time." "And did you make her promises?" Adanna asked sharply. Daniel sighed. "Vanessa is twisting things. I never made Cynthia promises I didn't intend to keep. I cared about her, but I knew I couldn't give her what she wanted, so I ended things." Adanna processed his words carefully. Was Vanessa simply trying to break them apart, or was Daniel withholding part of the truth? I don't want to be another Cynthia, Daniel, she said quietly. I need to know that this, us, means something real to you. Daniel's voice was firm. You are not another Cynthia, Adanna. What I feel for you is different. But I understand your doubts, and I'm willing to prove myself to you. Adanna wanted to believe him. But was love ever that simple? The following days were filled with inner turmoil. Tola, ever the protective friend, had her own thoughts on the matter. You need to be careful, Adanna, Tola warned. I get that Daniel says all the right things, but men like him know how to talk their way out of situations. Adanna sighed, stirring her cup of tea absent-mindedly. I know, Tola. But I also don't want to walk away just because someone from his past has an agenda. Tola folded her arms. Then what's your plan? Adanna didn't have one. But she knew she couldn't keep wavering. She decided to give Daniel the benefit of the doubt, but with caution. That weekend, she agreed to have dinner with him at his place. As she arrived at his luxurious apartment, he greeted her with a warm embrace. I've missed you, he murmured against her hair. Adanna allowed herself to relax. Maybe she was overthinking things. Maybe, just maybe, Daniel was truly different. But as they settled into dinner, a knock sounded at the door. Daniel frowned and got up to answer it. Adanna watched as he opened the door, and her heart stopped when she heard the visitor's voice. Daniel, a woman said smoothly. Aren't you going to invite me in? Adanna's grip tightened on her fork. She already knew who it was before she even turned to look. Cynthia. Adanna's stomach twisted as she watched Daniel hesitate at the doorway. The woman standing before him was breathtaking, with an air of confidence that made her presence impossible to ignore. Cynthia. Cynthia, Daniel said, his voice tense. What are you doing here? Cynthia smirked, stepping forward slightly. You didn't think you could avoid me forever, did you? Adanna felt a rush of emotions, anger, curiosity, and a tinge of fear. She placed her fork down, took a deep breath, and stood up. If this was a test, she wouldn't fail it by sitting silently on the sidelines. I see you have company, Cynthia continued, her eyes landing on Adanna. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Daniel exhaled sharply. Now's not a good time, Cynthia. Then make time, Cynthia shot back. I need closure, Daniel. Adanna crossed her arms. Closure for what, exactly? She asked, her voice calm but firm. Cynthia turned to her with an appraising look. I don't expect you to understand, but Daniel and I have history. And some things were left unresolved. Daniel clenched his jaw. Cynthia, I told you before that there's nothing left between us. Cynthia chuckled softly, as if amused. If that were true, I wouldn't be here. Adanna's heart pounded. She had promised herself she wouldn't jump to conclusions, but the way Cynthia spoke, the way Daniel's shoulders tensed, there was more to the story than she had been told. And she needed the truth. Adanna forced herself to remain composed. Daniel, I think you should talk to her, she said finally. If there's truly nothing left, then this conversation won't change anything. Daniel turned to her, eyes filled with silent pleading. He didn't want to entertain Cynthia's presence, but Adanna wasn't going to let this linger any longer. Cynthia smiled. Smart woman, she said approvingly before turning to Daniel. 5 minutes. That's all I need. Daniel sighed and stepped outside with her, closing the door behind them. Adanna sat back down, trying to suppress the anxiety bubbling in her chest. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. Was Cynthia really just looking for closure? Or was she here to reclaim something Adanna wasn't ready to lose? Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. Adanna's patience wore thin. Finally, she stood and walked toward the door just as it swung open. Daniel stepped inside, looking weary. Cynthia was gone. "Well?" Adanna asked, her voice carefully measured. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. She wanted to apologize for how things ended. And she wanted to see if there was still something between us. Adanna swallowed hard. "And is there?" Daniel met her gaze, his voice steady. "No, Adanna. I love you." The words should have reassured her, but doubt still lingered. Was love enough to erase the ghost of his past?